After I refused to work overtime for free, my boss sneered, "You're lucky we even keep you around, no one else would hire someone like you." When I said I would be leaving at 5 p.m. sharp, he laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Fine, go home to your cats, spinster." I smiled, packed my desk, and sent an email CCing every department head, detailing his unauthorized overtime demands. By morning, his office was empty. I'm not someone who likes to make waves. I've always believed in showing up, doing your job, and going home. That's it. No drama, no games. I'm 39 years old, living in Dayton, Ohio, with my 2 cats, Ginger and Mo. I never really cared that I wasn't married or didn't have kids. But apparently, Carl, my boss, cared a lot. Carl ran our department like it was his little kingdom. He was in his late 40s, used too much hair gel, and always acted like he was doing us a favor by letting us have jobs. He had a few favorites. Young, pretty women who laughed at his bad jokes, and the rest of us he treated like dirt under his shoes. I had been working there for almost 5 years. I knew the job better than Carl did. But that didn't matter. To him, loyalty meant staying late without pay, covering up his mistakes, and smiling through it all. When the company announced they were cutting budgets, including overtime pay, Carl just kept pushing us harder. "Be a team player," he would say with a fake smile. I wasn't against staying late when needed. But working 3 to 4 extra hours every night for free? No way. I started keeping a log. Every time he told me to stay past 5 p.m., every time he made a comment about me having no life, I wrote it down. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with it yet. I just knew something inside me was getting heavier every day, like a knot tightening in my stomach. The real blow-up happened on a Tuesday. It was around 4:45 p.m. I was finishing up my daily reports when Carl came stomping over, throwing a thick file on my desk. "I need this entered into the system before tomorrow morning," he said. I flipped through it. It wasn't just a little bit of data. It was hours worth of work. "Sorry, Carl, I leave at 5, I said, not raising my voice. "I can start at first thing tomorrow." He leaned in closer, smiling that slimy smile he always wore when he was about to say something nasty. "You're lucky we even keep you around," he said, loud enough for half the office to hear. "No one else would hire someone like you." I could feel every eye in the room on me. The blood rushed to my face, but I stayed calm. "I'll be leaving at 5 p.m. sharp," I repeated, even as my hands shook a little. Carl laughed, a big, cruel laugh that bounced off the walls. "Fine," he sneered. "Go home to your cats, spinster." I stood there for a second, letting the words hang. Some people stared down at their keyboards, pretending they hadn't heard. Others just froze. Without a word, I picked up the framed photo of Ginger and Mo. Then my plant. Then my bag. Calm. Steady. I sat down at my computer one last time. I opened Outlook. Typed up an email with a subject line that couldn't be ignored: formal complaint, hostile work environment and labor law violations. I listed every incident, clear as day. Dates: Carl demanded unpaid overtime witnesses to his verbal abuse, the exact words he used that day, how unpaid overtime violated state and federal labor laws, how his personal insults created a hostile workplace. I attached the log I'd been keeping for months. Pages of it. I CC'd every department head, HR, legal, and the vice president of operations. I proofread it once. Hit send. Then, I grabbed my things and walked out the door, right at 5 p.m. At home, I didn't even stress. I fed my cats, made dinner, watched reruns of old crime shows. Slept like a rock. At 7:32 a.m. the next morning, my coworker Mindy texted me, "Mindy, girl. Carl just got marched out by security." 8 a.m. meeting with HR blew up. Another coworker, Rob, "He's gone. DP is walking around the floor taking notes." By noon, Carl's office was empty. His nameplate was stripped off. No emails from him. No goodbye speech. Just gone like he had never been there. HR sent out a company-wide memo that afternoon reminding everyone about labor laws, overtime policies, and how to report harassment confidentially. It was the first time in years that memo wasn't a joke. Over the next few weeks, a few of Carl's closest buddies, other managers who pushed unpaid overtime or made sleazy comments, started disappearing too. Some were asked to resign, others found other opportunities. The energy in the office changed. People smiled more. Some even thanked me quietly. I never told them what I did. They didn't need to know. As for me, I had already lined up interviews. 3 weeks later, I was starting a new job at a tech firm outside Dayton. A real company with real managers who respected people's time. Carl thought I had no options. No life. He thought I'd stay silent forever. He was wrong. The first few weeks at my new job felt like a fresh start. The people were respectful. The work hours were clear. If they needed you to stay late, they paid you. Simple as that. I felt like I could finally breathe again. But the past doesn't always stay buried. One Friday afternoon, about 2 months after I started the new job, I was leaving the building when I saw a familiar face in the parking lot. Carl. He was standing by a beat-up old sedan, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was messy, he had deep bags under his eyes, and he was wearing a cheap wrinkled suit that didn't fit him right. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I just saw a guy who looked like him. But then he saw me, and the way his face twisted with hate told me everything. He started walking toward me fast. I considered just getting in my car and locking the door, but something in me snapped. I stood my ground. He stopped a few feet away, breathing heavy. "You think you won?" he spat. I didn't say anything. Just looked at him. "You ruined my career," he said. 30 years. Gone. Because of a goddamn cat lady who couldn't handle a little overtime. Still, I said nothing. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. "You'll get yours," he hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Sooner or later. People like you always do." I got in my car without a word and drove off. My hands were shaking when I pulled into my driveway, but deep down, I knew I had made the right choice. Letting him scream into the wind didn't cost me anything. Letting him drag me into a public scene would have. But it didn't end there. The next week, my new boss called me into his office. "Got something strange today," he said, sliding a plain envelope across his desk. Inside was a printed-out email. No return address. No name. Just a bunch of accusations. That I was disloyal, that I couldn't be trusted, that I was a troublemaker who weaponized HR. It was obviously Carl. The way the email was written, the words he chose. It reeked of his style. Like he thought if he threw enough dirt, some of it would stick. My boss laughed it off. "Don't worry," he said. "We checked your references before we hired you. We know your old company. We know what went down." I smiled politely, but inside I was boiling. Carl was still trying to wreck me. He wasn't just angry. He wanted revenge. And he wasn't smart enough to hide it. I decided right then that if he wanted to play dirty, I wasn't going to just sit back. Not this time. First thing I did was talk to a lawyer. I explained everything, his behavior at the old job, the parking lot incident, the harassment attempts. The lawyer nodded thoughtfully. "If he keeps contacting you or your employers," she said, "we can file a cease and desist. If he still doesn't stop, we can move forward with harassment charges." That night, I wrote everything down again. I saved copies of the emails. I even bought a small dash cam for my car, just in case he decided to get stupid in person again. Weeks passed. Things settled down. I thought maybe he had finally given up. Then, one night, I came home to find my mailbox ripped off its post. My porch light was smashed. There were tire tracks across my lawn. And a single piece of paper taped to my door. "You're not safe." No signature. But I didn't need one. I called the police. I showed them everything. They filed a report, but without proof, they couldn't arrest him yet. The officer gave me a long look and said, "Get cameras. Lots of them." So I did. I covered my whole property with security cameras, including a hidden one facing the street. I wasn't going to live in fear. Not for him. Not for anyone. And deep down, a darker part of me started to grow. If Carl wanted war, he was going to find out that quiet, boring people like me, people he thought were weak, are sometimes the ones who hit back the hardest. After the night my porch was vandalized, I didn't sleep much. Every sound outside made me sit up straight in bed, heart pounding. But after a few nights of nothing happening, I settled back into my routine. The cameras were up, the lights were fixed, and I figured Carl had crawled back under whatever rock he came from. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was grocery shopping. It was a notification from my security app, motion detected, front yard camera. I pulled up the video. My blood ran cold. There he was, Carl, standing at the edge of my driveway. He looked rougher than before, like he hadn't shaved or showered in days. He didn't approach the house. He just stood there, staring at my front door for a full minute, then turned and walked away. I called the police again. This time, I had footage. Real proof. They took it seriously. An officer came to my house that evening, watched the video, and said, "This is stalking behavior. We'll file a restraining order." Within 3 days, Carl was served. He wasn't allowed within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. If he so much as drove past my street, he'd be arrested. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next blow didn't come at home. It came at work. One afternoon, as I was finishing up a client report, my manager, Rick, came by my desk looking serious. "You got a minute?" he asked. I followed him into a small conference room. On the table was a printout of an online post. It was a fake review on a career website. Full of lies. It said I was unstable, disruptive, and dangerous to clients and staff. It said I had been fired from my last job for violent outbursts. Rick looked uncomfortable. "We know it's fake," he said. "It's obviously retaliation. Legal's handling it." I just nodded, but inside, I was shaking with rage. Carl wasn't just trying to scare me anymore. He was trying to destroy me. Piece by piece. I spent that night sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a blank notebook. I needed a plan. Something more than just reacting. He thought I was weak. He thought if he pushed hard enough, I'd break. Instead, I was about to show him what breaking really looked like. First, I hired a private investigator. Someone experienced, someone smart. I gave him everything I had. The videos, the emails, the vandalism reports, the fake review. The PI smiled grimly and said, "People like him usually slip up eventually. I'll find out everything." It took less than 2 weeks. Turned out Carl had been fired from not just our old company, but 2 others since. Word about what he did to me, and others, had spread quietly through the industry. He was practically blacklisted. He was working part-time under the table for a sketchy freight company, trying to make ends meet. His wife had divorced him. His 2 teenage sons refused to speak to him. He was living in a tiny apartment above a pawn shop on the edge of town. The PI even caught him driving past my house again, this time while drinking from a bottle. That footage? That was enough. My lawyer filed a formal complaint for harassment and violation of the restraining order. We pushed for a court date. When Carl was served with the notice, he completely lost it. The final showdown was coming, and this time, it wouldn't be on some parking lot or street corner. It would be in a courtroom under bright lights, with real consequences. And Carl, who once sneered that no one would ever want me, was about to find out just how many people were willing to stand up against him. The courtroom smelled like dust and old paper. I sat at the long table next to my lawyer, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Across from me, Carl looked like a ghost of the man who used to strut around the office. His face was pale, his suit hung loose on him, and his eyes were wild. He wouldn't even look at me. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, called the room to order. The charges were laid out: harassment, stalking, violation of a restraining order, defamation. Carl's court-appointed lawyer, a kid who looked fresh out of law school, tried to argue that Carl was going through a hard time and that his actions weren't malicious, just emotional. My lawyer stood up calmly and started listing everything: the emails, the vandalism, the security footage, the fake reviews, the drunken drive-bys. We even had two of my old coworkers willing to testify about how Carl had treated me back at the old job. The judge listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't smile. She just wrote everything down. When it was Carl's turn to speak, he stood up, shaking with anger. "She ruined my life," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I gave her a job. I gave her chances. And she spat on me." The judge banged her gavel so hard the whole room jumped. "Sit down," she said. Carl sat. When the evidence was all laid out, the judge didn't take long to decide. Carl was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 6 months in county jail for the harassment and stalking charges. After that, he'd be on probation for 2 years, with mandatory anger management classes and a ban from owning a firearm. He also had to pay restitution for the property damage, over $5,000, and legal fees. And because of the defamation, he owed me a separate civil penalty. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to put even more pressure on his already crumbling life. When the judge read the sentence, Carl just sat there, slumped over, breathing heavy like he had been punched in the gut. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there quietly, watching the man who had tried to wreck my life finally get what he deserved. But the truth is, this whole thing changed me too. I wasn't the same quiet woman who once kept her head down and tried to avoid trouble. I had learned that sometimes, when someone pushes you too far, you don't just push back, you make sure they can't ever hurt you again. A few weeks after the trial, I moved to a new place, a little further out in the country. Bigger yard, quieter nights. Ginger and Mo loved it. I got promoted at work too. My manager said I had the kind of backbone this company needs. Funny, isn't it? The very thing Carl mocked me for, the quiet strength, the life he thought wasn't worth anything, is what saved me in the end. As for Carl? He sat in a jail cell, thinking about everything he lost. And I sat on my porch at sunset, a cat in my lap, finally at peace.